I expected a quiet dinner and an awkward slice of cake for my 30th. Instead, I walked into 70-plus people standing like a jury, and my parents holding a thick folder like a verdict. They did not just reveal the 0% DNA match, they turned my entire childhood into a bill, itemized and totaled to prove I never belonged. But they forgot about the stranger in the crowd who brought receipts that would absolutely ruin them. My name is Maisie Stewart, and for exactly 30 years. I thought I understood the shape of my life. I thought I knew where the edges were. I thought I knew who held the map. The drive to Matthews, North Carolina, was supposed to be a victory lap. I had the windows down, letting the humid air whip my hair around my face, trying to scrub off the sterile, recycled oxygen of the Kestrel Bridge Solutions office. I had just closed out the biggest data migration project of my career. It had been 6 months of eating vending machine sandwiches, sleeping 4 hours a night, and staring at code until my vision blurred into static. But as of 4 in the afternoon on that Tuesday, it was done. The client had signed off. My boss had actually smiled, a phenomenon I had not witnessed in 3 years, and I was driving home to a quiet dinner with the 2 people who were supposed to love me the most. My 30th birthday. It feels strange to say that number now. 30 sounds like an arrival. It sounds like you are finally standing on solid ground after spending your 20s scrambling up a loose gravel hill. I felt that solidity as I turned off the highway and navigated the familiar winding roads of the suburbs. I was an adult. I had a career. I had a paid-off sedan. I was going to eat my mother's pot roast, listen to my father complain about the homeowners association fees, eat a slice of grocery store cake, and be in bed by 10. That was the plan. The dread did not hit me until I turned onto Elmwood Drive. Usually, my parents' street is a ghost town on a Tuesday evening. Maybe you see a dog walker, or the flickering blue light of a television through a living room window. But you never see cars, not like this. It looked like a used car lot had vomited onto the pavement. There were vehicles parked bumper to bumper on both sides of the street, narrowing the driving lane to a single, claustrophobic strip. I had to crawl my car forward, my tires crunching against the perfectly manicured edge of the neighbors' lawns. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. My first thought was not a party. My parents were not party people. Gordon and Patrice Stewart viewed social gatherings with the same enthusiasm most people reserved for root canals. They valued privacy, order, and silence. A surprise party was antithetical to their DNA. So, I assumed someone was dying. I scanned the driveway. No ambulance, no police cruiser. Just more cars. I recognized my Aunt Carol's rusted minivan squeezed onto the grass. I saw the pristine Lexus belonging to my father's golf partner. I saw cars I did not recognize at all, bearing license plates from 2 counties over. I parked 3 houses down, in front of the Miller's place, and jogged toward the house. My heels clicked unevenly on the asphalt. I was still wearing my work blazer, and the humidity was already making the fabric stick to my shoulder blades. Panic is a strange thing. It makes you notice the smallest details while the big picture blurs. I noticed the grass needed cutting. I noticed the porch light was not on. Even though dusk was settling in like a bruise over the sky, I bypassed the front door. We never used the front door. The front door was for strangers and census takers. Family came in through the garage. I punched the code into the keypad, 1995, and the heavy door groaned upward on its tracks. The smell hit me instantly. It is funny how a smell can bypass your brain and go straight to your gut. It smelled of motor oil, damp cardboard, and old latex paint. It was the smell of my father's domain. He kept his tools outlined in black marker on a pegboard. He kept his recycling bins scrubbed clean. It was a smell that usually signaled safety. It meant I was home. It meant that whatever chaos was happening out in the world, in here. Things were organized. Things made sense. I let out a breath I did not know I had been holding. Okay, I told myself. Okay, maybe it is a surprise party. Maybe they finally cracked. Maybe they wanted to celebrate the big 3-0 in a way they never had before. I felt a sudden surge of guilt for assuming a medical emergency. They were trying. They were actually trying. I adjusted my bag on my shoulder, pasted a grateful smile on my face, and opened the door leading from the garage into the kitchen. I was ready to shout surprise. I was ready to feign shock. I was ready to be hugged. Instead, I walked into a wall of silence so heavy it felt physical. The kitchen and the living room beyond it were packed. I did dramatic head counts later, replaying the memory like a crime scene tape, and I realized there were 78 people in my parents' house. 78. They were squeezed between the granite island and the refrigerator. They were lined up along the hallway. They were standing 3 deep near the patio doors, and nobody was moving. There was no music. There were no balloons. There was no banner strung up with glittery letters. There was no cake sitting on the counter. There were just eyes. 78 pairs of eyes locked onto me the second the latch clicked. The smile died on my lips. The air in the room felt vacuum-sealed, sucked devoid of oxygen. It was not the hush of a crowd waiting to yell a greeting. It was the hush of a courtroom when the defendant walks in. It was the hush of a church before a funeral. "Mom?" I said. My voice cracked. It sounded impossibly small in the cavernous silence. I looked for her. I needed to find her. Patrice Stewart was my anchor. She was the woman who smoothed things over. She was the one who whispered to me that Dad didn't mean it when he got critical. She was the one who always made sure I had a plate of food before she sat down. I found her sitting at the dining room table. She was not looking at me. She was staring at the grain of the wood. Her lips pressed into a thin, white line. Her hands were on the table, clenched together so tightly that her knuckles looked like polished marble. She looked terrified, but not terrified for me. She looked terrified of me. "Dad?" I turned toward the living room. My father, Gordon, was standing by the fireplace. He commanded the room. He always did. He was a tall man who wore his height like a weapon, and tonight he was wearing his Sunday suit, the charcoal one he usually saved for weddings and high-stakes board meetings. He was not holding a drink. He was not holding a present. He was holding a thick, black 3-ring binder and a sealed manila envelope. He looked calm. It was a terrifying, unnatural calm. It was the face he wore when he was balancing the checkbook, or when he was explaining to a teenage me why I could not go to summer camp because the return on investment was not high enough. He looked like an accountant preparing to deliver an audit. The silence stretched on for 5 seconds, 10 seconds. It was agonizing. I felt the blood drain from my face. My skin prickled with a cold sweat. Is everyone okay?" I asked, taking a tentative step forward. Nobody answered. A cousin I had not seen in 5 years, standing near the refrigerator, shifted his weight and looked at the floor. Mrs. Higgins, the next-door neighbor who had known me since I was in diapers, turned her head away as if looking at me was painful. The layout of the room was all wrong. People were not mingling. They were arranged. They had been positioned. There was a clear semicircle of empty space around the fireplace where my father stood, creating a stage, and I was standing at the other end of the room, near the garage door. Isolated. It felt like a trial. Then I saw the stranger. In the corner of the living room, there is a wingback chair with velvet upholstery that nobody is ever allowed to sit in. It is purely decorative. My mother dusts it twice a week. Sitting in that chair was a woman I had never seen before. She stuck out like a sore thumb. Everyone else was dressed in casual Tuesday evening clothes. Jeans, sweaters, maybe a few button-downs. This woman was wearing a sharp, beige trench coat that looked like it cost more than my car. She had executive posture, a spine of steel, and dark hair pulled back in a severe, no-nonsense bun. She had a leather briefcase resting against her ankles. She was not looking at my father. She was looking at me. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes were sharp, analytical, tracking my every micro-movement. She did not look like family. She did not look like a friend. She looked like a shark waiting in the shallows. I felt a wave of nausea roll over me. The smell of the garage, the comfort of the oil and cardboard, was gone, replaced by the scent of 78 bodies and the metallic tang of fear. "Gordon," my mother whispered. It was barely audible, But in the tomb-like silence, it sounded like a scream. "Gordon, please." My father ignored her. He did not even blink. He took a step forward, the binder heavy in his hand. He looked at the crowd. Then he looked at me. There was no warmth in his gaze. There was no recognition of the daughter he had raised. There was only the cold, hard calculation of a man looking at a problem he was about to solve. I felt the temperature in the room drop. I know the thermostat was set to 72 degrees, just like it always was, but I felt a chill seep into my bones that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. It was a spiritual cold. It was the feeling of the foundation shifting beneath my feet. The house itself felt different, the walls I had grown up within. The kitchen counter where I had done my homework, the fireplace where we had hung stockings, it all felt hostile. It felt like the house had been holding its breath for 30 years, waiting for this moment to exhale, waiting to expel me. "Maisie," my father said. He did not say happy birthday. He did not say hello. He said my name the way you say the name of a defective product you are returning to the store. "Come stand here," he commanded, pointing to a spot on the rug in the center of the room, directly in front of him, directly in the center of the staring crowd. My legs felt like lead. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to turn around, to run back into the garage, to get in my car and drive until I hit the ocean. But I couldn't move backward. The social pressure of 78 witnesses pinned me in place. I walked forward. The sound of my heels on the hardwood floor echoed like gunshots. I looked at the guests as I passed them. I looked for an ally. I looked for a smile. I saw my Uncle Ted, who used to sneak me candy when my mom wasn't looking. He was staring at his shoes. I saw my high school best friend's mother, who had been invited for some reason. She looked pitying, but also hungry, like she was watching a car crash and couldn't look away. I reached the center of the room. I stood where my father wanted me to stand. I was 10 feet away from him. He adjusted his grip on the binder. I could see tabs sticking out of the side of it. They were color-coded: yellow, red, blue. "We gathered everyone here today," my father began, his voice projecting to the back of the room without effort, "because there has been a misunderstanding. A long-term, expensive misunderstanding." He looked at the binder, then back at me. "And today," he said, "we are balancing the books." I looked at the stranger in the beige coat. She had not moved, but her hand was now hovering over the latch of her briefcase. She knew something. She knew what was in that binder. I looked at my mother. She had covered her face with her hands, and then I looked at my father, really looked at him, and realized with a jolt of absolute horror that he was enjoying this. The calmness wasn't just professionalism, it was satisfaction. He had been waiting for this. He had planned this. I was not the guest of honor. I was the defendant, and the trial had just begun. "Sit," my father said. It was not an invitation, it was a directive, the kind you give to a dog that has just muddied the carpet. I did not sit. I could not. My knees were locked, fused by a mixture of adrenaline and sheer confusion. The 78 people in the room seemed to lean in collectively, a vacuum of silence that sucked the air right out of my lungs. I looked at Gordon Stewart, a man who had taught me how to ride a bike, how to balance a checkbook, and how to tie a tie because he said a woman should know how to be useful in every situation. I looked for a punchline. I looked for the twinkle in his eye that would signal this was some elaborate, morbid joke about the cost of raising a child in the 21st century. There was no twinkle. His eyes were flat, dull surfaces that reflected nothing but his own righteousness. "If you won't sit, you will listen," he said, his voice level. He did not shout. Gordon never shouted. He believed that raising one's voice was a sign of a weak argument. He adjusted his grip on the black binder, the plastic cover creaking in the quiet room. "Maisie, we have always raised you to value transparency. We have raised you to understand the value of $1. We have raised you to understand that actions have consequences, and that life is, at its core, a series of transactions." He took a step closer to me. The distance between us felt like a canyon. "Tonight is about accountability," he said. He extended his arm, holding the binder out to me. It was heavy, thick with premium 20-pound paper. I took it automatically, my muscle memory obeying him before my brain could protest. The cover was protected by a clear plastic sheet. Beneath it, in bold, sans serif font, probably Arial, size 24, was a title that made the room spin. Maisie, Cost Report, 1995 to present. I stared at the words. The letters swam before my eyes. Cost Report. Not memory book, not photo album. Cost Report. Open it, he said. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped it. I fumbled with the cover. Turning to the first tab, it was yellow. The label on the tab read, Medical and Dental. I looked down at the first page. It was a spreadsheet, a meticulously maintained, formatted, and printed spreadsheet. The columns were perfectly aligned. Date, description, provider, gross cost, insurance adjustment, out-of-pocket, inflation adjusted, total. I read the first entry. October 14th, 1998. Emergency room, stitches, forehead, $342.50. I touched the paper. I remembered that scar. I was 3 years old. I had tripped over the rug in the hallway, this very hallway, and hit my head on the baseboard. I remembered crying. I remembered my mother holding a washcloth to my head, her face pale. I remembered my father driving us to the hospital, his jaw set tight. I had thought he was worried about me. I had thought his silence was fear for his daughter's safety. Now, looking at the spreadsheet, I realized he hadn't been worried. He had been calculating. He had been angry about the deductible. Turn to page 4, Gordon commanded. I turned. The sound of the page turning was deafening in the silent room. August 21st, 2008. Orthodontics, braces, Phase 1, $4,200. September 10th, 2008. Orthodontics, extractions, $850. You had crooked teeth, my father said to the room. Not to me. He was addressing the audience now, performing his grievance. Expensive teeth. We didn't have to fix them. Cosmetic procedures are a luxury, not a right. But we did it. We paid for the straight smile you used to get that job at Kestrel Bridge. I looked up at the crowd. Mrs. Higgins was chewing on her lip, her eyes wide. My cousin David was staring at the floor, his face red, but nobody moved. Nobody said, Gordon, stop this. This is insane. They watched with a morbid fascination. It was reality television playing out in their living room, and they were the studio audience. They were witnessing a dissection. Keep going, Gordon said. The blue tab, extracurriculars. I flipped the tab. Ballet classes, 1999 to 2004, $3,600. Piano lessons, 2001 to 2005, $4,800. School trip to Washington, D.C., 2006, $650. Every dance recital where they had sat in the audience, clapping. Every terrible piano rendition of Fur Elise they had endured. Every moment I thought was an expression of their support, of their desire to see me grow and learn. It was all here. It was all itemized. It was all just a bill they had been tracking. We gave you opportunities, my father said, his voice taking on a martyr's cadence. We invested in your culture. We invested in your education. We did not scrimp. Look at the totals. Maisie, look at the bottom of page 12. I looked. The number was staggering. Subtotal for education and enrichment, $42,875.12. Why? I whispered. The words scraped my throat. Why do you have this? My mother, Patrice, finally spoke. She did not stand up. She stayed seated at the table, her hands still locked together in that white-knuckled grip. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her, shrinking into her cardigan. We did what we had to, she said. Her voice was thin, reedy. It sounded rehearsed. We kept records. It is responsible parenting. You You can't just let things go unaccounted for. Unaccounted for? I looked at her, pleading with her to be my mother, to be the woman who had made me soup when I had the flu, not this stranger talking about accounting. I'm your daughter. I'm not a tax write-off. You don't keep receipts for a child. We do when we need to correct an error, Gordon interrupted. He walked over to the fireplace mantel and picked up a highlighter, yellow, to match the tabs. He uncapped it with a sharp click. You see? He said, pacing back toward me. Most parents accept these costs as a sunk investment. They assume that the biological imperative justifies the expense. They pay for the food, the clothes, the shelter, because they are propagating their own line. It is a biological contract. I feed you. You carry my genetics forward. It is a fair trade. He stopped directly in front of me. But when the contract is void, he said softly, the expenses become liabilities. He pointed to the binder. Turn to the summary page, the back. I flipped to the back. There was a single sheet of paper. It contained a grand total, a number so large it looked like a phone number. Total expenditure, 1995 to 2025. Adjusted for Consumer Price Index inflation, $348,922.41. $348,000, Gordon said, rolling the number around in his mouth like fine wine. That is what you have cost us. That is the price tag of your existence in this house. I felt sick, physically, violently sick. The room was spinning. I looked at the stranger in the beige coat in the corner. She was writing something down in a notebook, her face grim. You kept receipts, I said, my voice shaking. For 30 years. You kept the grocery bills? You kept the receipts for my school clothes? We reconstructed some of the earlier years based on average market data, Gordon admitted, sounding proud of his methodology. But from 2005 onward, yes, we have the physical receipts, scanned and digitized. The horror of that statement washed over me. It meant that every time I had asked for a new pair of sneakers, every time I had needed money for a field trip, every time I had eaten a second helping of dinner, he had been logging it. He had been entering it into a database. While I was hugging him goodnight, he was calculating the amortization of my mattress. This was not a sudden snap. This was not a breakdown. This was a 30-year fraud. They had been playing a role. They had been acting the part of loving parents while secretly building a case against me. We have been very generous, Gordon said, gesturing to the silent crowd. Everyone here can attest to that. We provided a stable home. We provided a safe environment. We never asked for a penny of rent, even when you moved back in for 3 months after college. We absorbed that cost. We were benevolent. Benevolent? I choked out. You're my father. I am a man who believes in fairness, he corrected. And it is not fair for one party to bear the entire financial burden of a project that, ultimately, does not belong to them. He walked back to the fireplace and picked up the manila envelope. He held it with 2 hands, treating it with reverence. We are closing the books, Maisie, he said. Tonight is the fiscal year-end of our relationship. He slid the envelope across the coffee table toward me. It moved with a hiss of paper against wood, stopping just inches from my knees. Inside that envelope, he said, is a settlement agreement. We have calculated a repayment plan. It is very reasonable, low interest. We are willing to stretch it out over 20 years. We simply want to recoup the principal. We want to be made whole. I looked at the envelope. I looked at the binder in my hands. I looked at the faces of my aunts, uncles, neighbors, and friends. This was not a birthday party. I realized then why the room was arranged this way. I realized why there was no cake. I realized why everyone was silent. This was a public exit interview. My parents were firing me, and just like any corporate termination. They had brought documentation to prove cause. They had brought the performance review. They had brought the ledger, and they had brought security, the 78 witnesses, to make sure I went quietly, without making a scene. You want me to pay you back? I asked, the absurdity of it cutting through the shock. For raising me? You want me to write you a check for my childhood? We want you to take responsibility, Patrice whispered from the table. She sounded like she was reciting a line she had memorized, but didn't fully understand. It's only right. Maisie, it's only fair. We can't be expected to pay for a mistake forever. A mistake, I repeated. Gordon nodded. An administrative error, a clerical oversight that we have corrected. He gestured to the envelope again. The numbers don't lie. Maisie, feelings lie, memories lie. But the numbers? The numbers are pure, and the numbers say you are in the red. Deep in the red, he looked at the crowd, inviting them to agree. We are just balancing the equation, he said. We are just making things right. I looked at the binder again. Cost report. The weight of it in my hands felt like an anchor. They had turned my life into a spreadsheet. They had turned my memories into line items. And now, they were handing me the bill. But as I looked at the inflation-adjusted column, a spark of something other than grief flared in my chest. It was small, but it was hot. It was the heat of realization. You do not present a bill like this unless you are desperate. You do not humiliate your daughter in front of 78 people unless you are trying to force her hand. You do not call it a settlement agreement unless you are afraid of a lawsuit. Gordon Stewart was a man who never did anything without a calculation. He never spent a dime without expecting $1 in return. So why was he cashing me out now? Why? On the night of my 30th birthday? Was he so desperate to prove that I owed him? I looked at the envelope. I didn't reach for it. I'm not signing anything, I said. My voice was quiet, but it was steady. Gordon's smile faltered. Just for a fraction of a second. The mask slipped. His eyes narrowed. You will read it, he said, his voice dropping an octave. And you will sign it, because the alternative, Maisie, is that you leave this house with nothing, no family, no history, no name. He paused, letting the threat hang in the air like smoke. We are offering you a chance to buy your place in this family, he said. We are offering you a lease. I suggest you take it. He thought he was a judge handing down a sentence. He thought he was a CEO firing a redundant employee. But as I stood there, clutching the evidence of his 30-year betrayal, I realized he was wrong about one thing. He wasn't the only one in the room who knew how to look at the numbers. And looking at his face, tight, sweaty, overly eager, I realized that for the first time in his life, Gordon Stewart might have miscalculated. I am not signing anything, I repeated, my voice gaining a fraction of the strength I had lost. You can't ask me to pay for my own childhood. That is insane. It is illegal. Gordon did not flinch. He did not look like a man whose authority had been challenged. He looked like a man who had anticipated the objection and had already prepared the counter-argument. He looked at the binder in my hands. Then he looked at the crowd, ensuring every eye was fixed on him. You are operating under a false assumption. Maisie, he said, his tone dropping to a terrifyingly conversational level. You are assuming that the standard parent-child contract applies here. You are assuming that because we fed you, clothed you, and housed you, we were fulfilling a biological obligation. He reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket. He pulled out a single, folded sheet of paper. It was not part of the binder. It was separate. It was pristine. We thought so too, he continued. For a long time, we assumed that your lack of aptitude for mathematics, your inability to tan, your specific temperament, were just recessive traits, anomalies. We were patient. He unfolded the paper. The sound was sharp, like a cracker snapping. But numbers do not have anomalies, he said. Numbers have explanations. He held the paper up. It was a lab report. I could see the logo of a genetic testing company at the top, one of those high-end, private medical firms that do not advertise on television. Read the conclusion, he said, thrusting the paper toward me. He didn't wait for me to take it. He read it for me, his voice booming off the vaulted ceiling. Probability of paternity, 0%. Probability of maternity, 0%. The room did not gasp. They already knew. That was the most sickening part. The silence remained unbroken, heavy and humid. They had been briefed. They were not here for the reveal. They were here for the execution. 0, Gordon repeated, shaping the word with his mouth like he was spitting out a seed. You are not a Stewart. You are not a distant relation. You are a complete genetic stranger. I felt the floor tilt. I grabbed the edge of the sofa to steady myself. The world narrowed down to the white square of paper in his hand. That's not possible, I whispered. I have your nose. Mom always said I have your nose. I looked at Patrice. She was still studying the grain of the dining table, her posture rigid. Mom, I begged. Tell him. Patrice finally looked up. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but dry. There was no softness in them. There was only a deep, exhausted resentment. We can't keep pretending, Maisie, she said. Her voice was flat, devoid of the maternal cadence I had known for 3 decades. It has been exhausted. The charade is exhausted. The hospital made a mistake, Gordon stated. He said it with the same certainty he used when declaring the weather forecast wrong. 30 years ago, there was a switch, a mix-up, incompetence. We walked out with the wrong infant. We walked out with you. He lowered the paper, staring at me as if I were an intruder who had broken in through a window. We have been raising a stranger, he said. We have been pouring resources into a stranger. We have been loving a stranger. The word loving sounded like tolerating. So, you see, he continued, walking back to the fireplace and picking up the binder again. This is not a parent charging a child for their upbringing. That would be uncouth. This is a victim seeking restitution from the beneficiary of a fraud. He flipped the binder to the very last page, past the total I had seen earlier. Turn to the last page, Maisie, the one labeled Repayment Options. My hands were numb. I couldn't feel my fingertips. I fumbled with the plastic tabs, my vision blurring. I found the page. It was a loan amortization schedule. Principal, $348,922.41. Interest rate, 3% per annum, retroactive to January 1st, 2025. Term, 20 years. Monthly payment, $1,935. We are not unreasonable, Gordon said, his voice magnanimous. We are not charging interest for the years you were a minor. We are absorbing that loss. We are absorbing the emotional distress of raising a child that wasn't ours. That is our gift to you. He pointed to the column on the right. But from today forward, the free ride ends. You are an adult. You are employed. You have a salary. It is time you started paying your tab. He reached for the manila envelope on the coffee table and opened it. He pulled out a stapled document. Blue-backed, legal size. This is a promissory note, he said. It acknowledges the debt. It acknowledges that the services and goods provided to you from 1995 to the present were a loan, not a gift. It sets up a binding payment schedule. He uncapped a heavy, expensive fountain pen. He set the document down on the coffee table, smoothing it out with his palm. Sign it, he said. Sign it, and we can discuss a transition period. We can discuss letting you stay on the health insurance for another month. We can discuss civility. And if I don't? I asked. My voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. If you don't, Gordon said, then you are a thief. You are someone who took $300,000 of value from this family and refused to pay for it, and we will treat you accordingly. I looked around the room. I needed someone to tell me this was a nightmare. I needed someone to laugh. I needed someone to stand up and say, Gordon, you have lost your mind. But no one moved. I looked at my cousin Brad. He was leaning against the wall near the hallway, arms crossed. He caught my eye. He didn't look horrified. He smirked. It was a small, tight pull at the corner of his mouth, a look of vindication. He had always been the black sheep, the one who borrowed money, the one Gordon lectured. Now, the roles were reversed. He was blood. I was the parasite. He was enjoying the realignment of the hierarchy. I looked at Mrs. Higgins. She was nodding slowly, as if Gordon's logic made perfect sense. Yes, yes. Fair is fair. You can't just keep the wrong baby and not get a refund. They were all complicit. They had all accepted the narrative. The Stewart family brand was about solvency and accuracy. I was an accounting error, and tonight was the correction. I didn't ask to be born, I said, the tears finally spilling over, hot and humiliating. I didn't ask for the switch. How can you blame me? I was a baby. Ignorance of the law is not an excuse, Gordon quoted, a phrase he loved to use when contesting parking tickets. And ignorance of your origins does not absolve you of the debt. You benefited. Maisie, you consumed. You took piano lessons. You took vacations. You ate our food. You wore the clothes we bought. You cannot return the goods, so you must pay for them. He tapped the signature line with the tip of the pen. Ink bled slightly into the paper. We funded a stranger, he said, his voice hard as granite. Now the stranger needs to take responsibility. I looked at the document. I, Maisie Stewart, hereinafter referred to as the debtor. I can't pay this, I said. I don't have this kind of money. $1,900 a month? That's my rent. That's my food. Then you will need to make lifestyle adjustments, Patrice said. She was looking at me now, and her face was a mask of cold disappointment. We made sacrifices for you. We gave up vacations. We drove old cars. Now it is your turn to sacrifice. It is a simple choice, Gordon said. Sign the paper, acknowledge the debt, and we proceed as creditor and debtor, a respectable, business-like arrangement. Or, he turned and pointed toward the front door. I hadn't noticed it before. Sitting by the entryway, next to the umbrella stand, was a bag. It wasn't a suitcase. It wasn't a set of luggage. It was my old high school gym bag, a battered, blue duffel bag with the peeling logo of the Matthews High Wildcats. It was the bag I used to stuff my sweaty gym clothes in. It was the bag I used for sleepovers. It was lumpy. It was zipped haphazardly. A sleeve of a sweater was sticking out of the zipper. We took the liberty of packing your personal effects, Gordon said. The things that are strictly yours, the clothes you bought with your own salary, the toiletries. He paused, letting the implications sink in. Everything else, he said. Everything purchased with Stewart funds stays here, the car, the phone, the laptop, the jewelry. He looked at me with a finality that shattered whatever was left of my heart. If you do not sign, he said, you take that bag and you leave. You leave the car keys. You leave the phone. You walk out that door. And you are no longer our problem. We will file a civil suit for the debt on Monday. But as of tonight, our hospitality ends. I looked at the bag. It looked pathetic sitting there. It looked like the luggage of a runaway. It looked like the luggage of someone who didn't matter. You packed my bag? I whispered. Before I even got here? Preparation is the key to execution, Gordon said. He held the pen out to me. Sign or leave. I stood there, vibrating with a mixture of grief and rage so potent I thought I might explode. I looked at the pen. I looked at the bag. I realized then that there was no winning this. Even if I signed, I was losing them. I had already lost them. You cannot have a father who sues you. You cannot have a mother who packs your bag like she is taking out the trash. The relationship was dead. The only question was whether I would pay for the funeral. I didn't take the pen. I didn't say a word. I turned my back on Gordon. I turned my back on Patrice. I walked toward the door. The silence in the room shifted. It wasn't the heavy, oppressive silence of the beginning. It was a rustling silence, a shifting silence. I reached the bag. I bent down and picked it up. It was light, terrifyingly light. 30 years of life, and this was what I was allowed to keep. I slung the strap over my shoulder. It dug into my blazer. I reached for the doorknob, and then I heard it. Clap. It was a single, sharp sound. Clap, clap. It was coming from the corner. I turned my head. Just slightly. It was my Uncle Ted, the one who gave me candy. He was clapping. His face was solemn, respectful. He was looking at Gordon. Clap, clap, clap. Mrs. Higgins joined in, then Cousin Brad, then the neighbors. It wasn't a raucous applause. It wasn't a standing ovation. It was a polite golf tournament clap. It was the sound of a group of people agreeing that a difficult task had been handled well. They were applauding Gordon's strength. They were applauding his fairness. They were applauding the solution to the problem of Maisie. The sound swelled. It filled the room. 78 people clapping for my eviction. 78 people celebrating the fact that the Stewarts had finally cut the dead weight. The sound was worse than any scream. It was civilized. It was orderly. It was the sound of my life being erased with social approval. I didn't look back at them. I couldn't. If I looked at them, I would crumble. I opened the door and walked out into the dark, humid night. The sound of their polite applause following me like a pack of wolves that had learned how to behave at a dinner party. I had my hand on the brass doorknob. The metal was cool against my sweaty palm. I was 1 second away from stepping into the humidity of the North Carolina night and disappearing from the lives of Gordon and Patrice Stewart forever. The polite applause was still rippling through the room, a surreal soundtrack to my exile. Stop. The word did not come from my parents. It did not come from a sympathetic relative. It came from the corner of the room, cutting through the clapping like a gavel strike. It was not a shout. It was a command. It was a voice trained in courtrooms, a voice that knew exactly how to modulate pitch to command absolute silence. The applause died instantly. The room fell back into that suffocating quiet. But the texture of the silence had changed. It was no longer expectant. It was confused. I did not turn the knob. I froze, my gym bag heavy on my shoulder. "If she walks out that door," the voice said, calm and crisp, "everyone in this room becomes complicit in a felony fraud scheme, and I will make sure the subpoenas reflect that." I turned around. The woman in the beige trench coat was standing. She had moved from the decorative wingback chair and was now standing in the center of the Persian rug, creating a new focal point that eclipsed my father entirely. She looked tall, even without heels. She held her leather briefcase in one hand, not clutching it, but holding it like a weapon she knew how to use. Gordon's face went from smug satisfaction to irritation. He adjusted his glasses. "Excuse me?" he said, using his boardroom voice. "Who are you? I don't recall inviting you. If you are a friend of Maisie's, you can leave with her." The woman ignored him. She walked straight toward me. She moved with a predatory grace, her eyes locked on mine. She didn't look at me with pity. She looked at me with professional assessment. "My name is Rowan Pike," she announced, her voice projecting clearly to the back of the room where the neighbors were craning their necks. "I am an attorney. I am not a friend of Maisie's. In fact, until this moment, we have never met." She stopped 3 feet from me. She smelled of expensive sandalwood soap and cold ambition. "I am the personal representative for the Hartwell estate," she said. The name caused a ripple in the room. In this part of the state, the name Hartwell meant something. It meant old textile money. It meant the kind of wealth that built libraries and owned senators. "And," Rowan continued, turning slowly to face Gordon, "I am not here for the Stewarts. I am here for the rightful beneficiary of the Hartwell Trust." She pointed a manicured finger at me. "I am here for her." Gordon let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Her? You must be mistaken. We just established the facts. She is nobody. She is a genetic dead end. We have the lab report." "You have a lab report that proves she is not yours," Rowan corrected. "That is the only accurate piece of paper in this entire house." She walked over to the coffee table. Gordon made a move to block her, but she shot him a look so withering he actually took a step back. She picked up the lab report Gordon had flourished moments ago. "You stopped reading too soon, Mr. Stewart," she said. "Genetic testing is a comparative science. It doesn't just exclude, it matches." She looked at the crowd. "The DNA results, do not just prove Maisie is not a Stewart, they connect her, with 99.9% certainty, to the Hartwell family line. My knees gave out. I didn't fall, but I slumped against the doorframe. The gym bag slid off my shoulder and hit the floor with a thud. "What?" I whispered. Rowan turned back to me, her expression softening just a fraction. It was the first time she looked human. "The Hartwells had a daughter," Rowan said. "Her name was Wren Hartwell." She said the name with reverence. "Wren passed away 14 months ago," Rowan continued. "She was 30 years old. She died of a rare genetic blood disorder, a disorder that, interestingly enough, neither Conrad nor Lila Hartwell carried." The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the refrigerator. "When the doctors ran the screening to find a bone marrow match," Rowan said, "they discovered an anomaly. Wren was not biologically related to her parents. She was not a Hartwell." She let that sink in. "Matthews General Hospital, 1995, Rowan said. "It was a busy night, understaffed, 2 emergency C-sections happening simultaneously, 2 baby girls, 1 healthy, 1 with a latent genetic condition that wouldn't show up for decades." She looked at my mother. Patrice had gone pale, her hands trembling violently on the table. "Wren lived a good life," Rowan said, "but in her final months, when she knew the truth, she made a specific legal request. She instructed the estate to locate her biological sibling. She wanted to know who was living the life that was genetically hers, and she wanted to ensure that if she died, her rightful sister was protected." Rowan reached into her briefcase and pulled out a photo. She held it up for me. It was a picture of a girl. She had my chin. She had my eyes. She had the same unruly wave in her hair that I had spent thousands of dollars trying to straighten. "She found you, Maisie," Rowan said. "We found you. We have been watching for 6 weeks, verifying the connection." Gordon stepped forward, his face flushing a deep, ugly red. "This is preposterous," he sputtered. This is a fairy tale. Even if it is true, it doesn't change the facts of tonight. We raised her. We incurred the costs. She owes us." He pointed a shaking finger at the promissory note on the table. "She is a debtor," Gordon insisted. "And until she satisfies that debt, she has no business listening to you." Rowan smiled. It was a terrifying smile. It was the smile of a wolf that has just cornered a rabbit. "Ah, yes, the debt." She walked over to the binder. The cost report. She picked it up with 2 fingers, as if it were contaminated waste. "This," she said, dropping it back onto the table with a loud slap, "is not a ledger, it is a trap." She looked at the guests. "You all saw a father asking for reimbursement," she said. "I saw something very different. I saw a man who knew his daughter was about to inherit a significant estate, and who was frantically trying to secure a piece of it before she found out." Gordon went rigid. "I had no idea." "Don't lie to me, Gordon," Rowan snapped. Her voice cracked like a whip. "I am a forensic attorney. Do you think I walked in here without running a background check on you? On your finances?" She turned to the crowd, addressing them like a jury. "The promissory note he tried to make her sign?" Rowan said. "I read the text while it was sitting there. It doesn't just acknowledge a debt of $300,000, Clause 14, Paragraph B. It grants the creditor, Mr. Stewart, power of attorney over the debtor's future assets to satisfy the claim." She looked at me. "If you had signed that paper, Maisie, you wouldn't just be agreeing to pay them back. You would be giving Gordon control over the Hartwell inheritance. He wasn't trying to recoup the cost of braces. He was trying to intercept a fortune." My father stood frozen. He looked like a statue of a man realizing the pedestal was crumbling. "That is standard boilerplate language," Gordon stammered. "It is a standard protection for the lender." "And the loans?" Rowan asked softly. The color drained from Gordon's face completely. He looked like a ghost. "I beg your pardon?" he managed to say. Rowan turned back to the audience. "I mentioned that we have been verifying Maisie's identity," she said. Part of that process involves a deep dive into her credit history to ensure she is who she says she is. She took a step closer to Gordon. We found some interesting things. Gordon, we found 3 credit cards opened in Maisie's name in 2023. We found a small business loan taken out under her Social Security number last year. A loan for a consulting firm that doesn't seem to exist, I gasped. I never opened any loans. I rent an apartment. I drive a 5-year-old car. I know you didn't, Rowan said to me. But someone did. Someone with access to your personal documents. Someone who knew your Social Security number. Someone who had a copy of your birth certificate. She turned her gaze back to my father. The payments on those loans are being made from a bank account in the Cayman Islands, Rowan said. But the initial deposit? That came from a joint account, the Stewart Family Trust. Gordon's hands were shaking so hard now that he had to clasp them behind his back. He tried to laugh, but it came out as a dry, hacking sound. This is a misunderstanding, he said. Financial maneuvering, tax optimization. I was managing her portfolio. I was building her credit. You were using her identity to wash money, Rowan said. And you were terrified that when the Hartwell estate lawyer showed up, we would audit her. So you staged this theater. She gestured to the room, to the binder, to the packed bags. You wanted to humiliate her, Rowan said. You wanted to crush her self-esteem so thoroughly that she would sign anything you put in front of her just to make the pain stop. You wanted to bind her to you legally before she had the resources to fight back. She looked at Patrice. And you, Rowan said. You knew. You watched him draft that document. You watched him cook the books. And you sat there tonight and let him present a bill to the daughter you stole? Patrice put her head on the table and began to sob. It wasn't a sympathetic sound. It was the sound of an accomplice realizing the getaway car had a flat tire. We didn't steal her, Patrice wailed into the wood. It was a mistake. The hospital. The hospital made a mistake 30 years ago, Rowan said. What you did tonight, that wasn't a mistake. That was a conspiracy. Rowan walked back to me. She reached down and picked up my gym bag. She dusted it off. You don't need this, she said quietly. But keep it. It's evidence. She turned to face the room one last time. The 78 guests were paralyzed. The cousin who had smirked was now looking at the floor, pale and sweating. Mrs. Higgins was clutching her purse to her chest. They realized, with dawning horror, that they weren't just guests at a bad party, they were spectators to a crime. Rowan smiled at them. It was ice cold. I suggest you all remember exactly what you saw tonight, she said. Who said what? Who handed over which document? Who threatened whom? She pulled a business card from her pocket and tossed it onto the coffee table, right on top of the promissory note. Congratulations, Rowan said. You are all witnesses now. She put a hand on my shoulder. It was warm. It was solid. Come on, Maisie, she said. Let's go. My car is outside, and unlike your father, I don't charge for the ride. I looked at Gordon one last time. He looked small. He looked terrified. He looked like a man who had spent his life counting pennies, only to realize he had just lost a fortune. I turned around and walked out the door. This time, there was no applause. There was only the sound of 78 people holding their breath. I did not slam the door. In movies, the protagonist always slams the door. They shatter the glass. They scream a final curse that haunts the family for generations. But I did not do any of that. I closed the door with a soft, definitive click, the kind of sound a latch makes when it secures a coffin. Walking through the driveway felt like leaving a crash site where I was the only survivor, but also the casualty. I walked past the cars of the 78 people who had watched my dissection. I passed my Uncle Ted's sedan. I passed the neighbor's SUV. They were just metal and glass, silent and indifferent. I felt a strange detachment, as if I were floating about 6 inches above the pavement. The humidity of the North Carolina night wrapped around me like a wet blanket, suffocating and heavy, a stark contrast to the refrigerated, sterile air of the house. I reached my car. It was a 5-year-old sedan, practical, gray, and paid for with money I had earned writing code. I opened the back door and threw my gym bag onto the seat. Then I looked at the passenger seat. I had the binder. I did not remember picking it up. My hands must have grabbed it in the chaotic wake of Rowan Pike's exit. It was sitting there on the passenger seat, the black plastic cover gleaming under the street lamp. Maisie. Cost report. It looked innocuous. It looked like a high school biology project. But I knew that inside, it contained the itemized receipt of my existence. It was a corpse I could not bury, a heavy paper-filled body that I was now dragging around with me. I got in. I started the engine. I did not look back at the house. I put the car in drive and navigated through the maze of parked vehicles. I focused entirely on the mechanics of driving. Hands at 10 and 2, check the mirrors, signal at the turn. If I focused on the rules of the road, I did not have to think about the fact that I no longer had a last name. I drove for 40 minutes. I did not know where I was going. I just needed to be in motion. I needed to put miles between myself and Elmwood Drive. I drove past the darkened strip malls, the closed banks, the gas stations with their lonely attendants sitting in bulletproof glass boxes. I ended up at a Waffle House off Highway 74. It was the only place open, a beacon of yellow light spilling out onto a cracked asphalt parking lot. The sign buzzed with a low electric hum that sounded like anxiety trapped in a glass tube. Inside, it was bright, aggressively bright. The fluorescent lights overhead were harsh, illuminating every scuff on the linoleum floor, every grease stain on the counter. I walked in. The place was mostly empty. A couple of truck drivers sat in a booth near the back, eating in silence. A group of teenagers were laughing in the corner, probably coming down from a concert or a late movie. They looked so young. They looked like they still believed their parents were heroes. "Just one, hun?" the waitress asked. She looked tired. Her name tag said Betty, and she had a pencil tucked behind her ear. "Just one," I said. My voice sounded rusty. I slid into a booth by the window. I put the binder on the table opposite me. It felt like I was having dinner with it. "Coffee?" Betty asked, flipping over a mug. "Please," I said. "And I will take a waffle, with pecans." I wasn't hungry. My stomach felt like it was full of broken glass, but ordering food felt like a tether to reality. Living people eat waffles. Living people sit in diners. If I ordered, I was still real. When the coffee came, I wrapped my hands around the mug, letting the heat scald my palms. I stared at the binder. I didn't open it. I knew what was in there. Braces. $4,000. Ballet. $3,000. I looked out the window. The traffic on the highway was sparse. Cars rushed by, red taillights streaking into the dark. Where were they going? Did those people have parents who kept receipts? Did they have fathers who laundered money in their names? The waffle arrived. It smelled of artificial vanilla and syrup. I cut a piece. I put it in my mouth. I chewed. It tasted like cardboard. It tasted like ash. I swallowed it only because spitting it out would require more energy than I possessed. I needed to wash my face. I slid out of the booth and walked to the restroom. The door was heavy and covered in stickers. Inside, the air smelled of bleach and cheap floral soap. I turned on the faucet, the water rushing out cold and hard. I splashed it on my face, ruining the mascara I had applied so carefully 3 hours ago for a birthday party that never happened. I looked up at the mirror. The glass was scratched, etched with initials and phone numbers. But my reflection was clear enough. I looked at my eyes. They were green. Gordon's eyes were blue. Patrice's eyes were brown. How had I never noticed? How had I gone 30 years seeing their faces in mine when there was nothing there? "Maisie Stewart," I said to the reflection. The name bounced off the tile walls. It sounded wrong. It sounded like a word from a foreign language I didn't speak. It felt borrowed, like a library book I was overdue to return. "Maisie Hartwell." I tried. That felt worse. That felt like stealing. I gripped the edge of the sink, staring at the woman in the mirror until her features started to blur and separate. Who was she? If you take away the name, the history, the lineage, what is left? Was I just a collection of expensive teeth and bad investments? I reached into my pocket and pulled out the business card Rowan Pike had given me. It was heavy stock, cream-colored, with raised black lettering. Rowan Pike, attorney at law. I flipped it over. On the back, written in blue ink in a sharp, angular hand, was a note. Don't sign anything. Don't answer calls. I will explain everything tomorrow at 10. Trust your gut. It was right to leave. My gut. My gut was currently trying to digest a pecan waffle and failing. But reading the words gave me a strange, small comfort. Someone had a plan. Someone knew the script. I felt a vibration against my hip, then another, then a long, sustained buzz. My phone. I had ignored it in the car. I had been afraid to look at it. But now, in the harsh light of the bathroom, I pulled it out. The screen was a cascade of notifications. 12 missed calls, 19 text messages. I unlocked the screen. The messages scrolled by. A digital transcript of the fallout. Uncle Ted. Maisie, you need to come back. Your mother is hysterical. This isn't how we handle things. Cousin Brad. That was a hell of a show. Seriously, though. Gordon is threatening to call the cops if you took the car. Just a heads up. Aunt Carol. Sweetie, we are all praying for you. But you really should apologize to your father. He is very hurt. That woman was incredibly rude. I scrolled. And scrolled. They were all the same. Not one person asked, "Are you okay?" Not one person asked, "Is it true?" Not one person said, "I can't believe they did that to you." They were worried about the scene. They were worried about the volume. They were worried about the disruption of the Stewart family order. I was the rock that had been thrown through their window, and they were angry about the broken glass, not caring about the hand that threw it. Then I saw the text from Patrice. It had come in 3 minutes ago. I hesitated. My thumb hovered over the message. A part of me, the part that was 5 years old and scraped my knee, still wanted her to say she was sorry. That part of me wanted her to say, "Come home. We made a mistake. We love you." I opened the message. Patrice, please don't embarrass us further. We have neighbors involved now. Gordon is willing to negotiate the interest rate if you come back tonight and sign. Just be reasonable. I stared at the screen until the backlight dimmed and turned off. Don't embarrass us. Not I love you. Not I'm sorry. Not my daughter. Don't embarrass us. And Gordon is willing to negotiate the interest rate. I put the phone down on the porcelain sink. I looked back at the mirror. For 30 years, I thought I had a family. I thought the tension in the house was just their personality. I thought the coldness was just their style. I thought the demands for perfection were because they wanted the best for me. But it wasn't style. It wasn't personality. It was a transaction. I wasn't grieving a family. I realized that with a clarity that cut sharper than any knife, you can't grieve something that never existed. I was grieving a hallucination. I was grieving the story I had told myself to survive living in that house. I was grieving the illusion that for 30 years, someone had looked at me and seen a person, not a line item in a ledger. They didn't love me. They didn't even like me. They had simply managed me. I was an asset that had depreciated, and tonight they had tried to liquidate the remaining stock. I picked up the phone. I didn't reply. I didn't delete the messages. I just turned the device off. The screen went black. I put it in my pocket. I grabbed Rowan's card. I walked out of the bathroom, back into the fluorescent buzz of the dining room. I walked to the table, picked up the binder, and tucked it under my arm. I left $5 on the table for the waffle I didn't eat. I walked out to my car, the humidity hitting me again, but this time, it didn't feel suffocating. It felt like the air before a storm. The old Maisie Stewart, the one who tried so hard to please, the one who apologized for taking up space, had died in that kitchen. I didn't know who the new version was yet, but as I threw the binder into the back seat and got behind the wheel, I knew one thing for sure. She wasn't paying for the privilege of being abused anymore. The morning sun over Lake Norman did not feel like a new beginning. It felt like an interrogation lamp. I sat in the passenger seat of Rowan Pike's pristine sedan, watching the landscape shift from the cluttered suburban sprawl of Matthews to something wider, greener, and significantly more expensive. We passed gated driveways that disappeared into dense forests of pine. We passed glimpses of water that sparkled with a blinding, indifferent brightness. Rowan had picked me up from the motel, where I had spent the night staring at the ceiling, clutching my gym bag like it contained the nuclear codes. She hadn't asked me how I slept. She knew the answer was, I didn't. She had simply handed me a cup of black coffee and said, "We are going to meet them." Them meant the Hartwells, Conrad and Lila, my biological parents. The words felt ridiculous in my head. Parents were people who itemized your dental work. Parents were people who packed your bags before you arrived. Parents were a liability. The idea that there were two strangers living in a lakeside fortress who shared my DN. It felt less like a miracle, and more like a complication I didn't have the bandwidth to process. "They are good people," Rowan said, breaking the silence as we turned off the main road onto a private lane paved with crushed gray stone. "But they are grieving. You need to prepare yourself for that. You are walking into a house that is essentially a mausoleum for the daughter they lost." "Great," I muttered. Looking at my reflection in the side mirror, my eyes were puffy. My hair was pulled back in a severe knot because I didn't have a brush. "So I am the consolation prize." "No," Rowan corrected sharply. "You are the sequel they didn't know was in production." We pulled up to the house. It wasn't the sprawling, ostentatious mansion I had feared. It didn't look like the home of a villain in a soap opera. It was a sprawling craftsman-style structure, made of cedar shakes and stone, settling into the landscape rather than dominating it. It looked peaceful. It looked settled. It looked like the kind of place where people didn't keep spreadsheets of their children's caloric intake. But the moment the front door opened, I felt the air change. A woman stood in the doorway. She was small, fragile-looking, wearing a cashmere cardigan that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. Her hair was silver, cut in a chic bob, but her face was a map of devastation. Lila Hartwell. Behind her stood a man who looked like he had been carved out of oak and then weathered by a hurricane. Conrad Hartwell. He had broad shoulders that were currently slumped, and he was gripping the doorframe as if the house might blow away if he let go. I got out of the car. My legs felt heavy. I walked up the stone path, conscious of the gravel crunching under my cheap sneakers. Lila didn't wait for introductions. She stepped out onto the porch, her eyes locked on my face. She made a small, wounded sound in the back of her throat, a sound halfway between a gasp and a sob. "Oh," she whispered. "Oh, my God." She reached out a hand but stopped inches from my face, her fingers trembling in the air. She wanted to touch me, but she was terrified that I might shatter, or perhaps that I might not be real. "She looks just like her," Conrad said. His voice was deep, rough like gravel. "Conrad, look at the eyes. She has the eyes." I stood there, frozen. I was being scanned. I was being compared. I wasn't Maisie Stewart, the data analyst. I was a mirror. I was a ghost. "Hello," I said. It was the only word I could manage. "Come in," Lila said, finally dropping her hand. "Please, come in. You must be exhausted. You must be hungry." The desperation in her voice was palpable. It was a frantic, terrifying kindness. It was the kindness of someone trying to fix a shattered vase with their bare hands, not caring if they cut themselves. I followed them inside. The house smelled of lavender and old paper. It was beautiful. High ceilings, exposed beams, a wall of windows looking out over the lake. But it was quiet, not the hostile silence of the Stewart house, but a heavy, mourning silence. They led me to a sunroom that felt less like a living space and more like a shrine. Every surface was covered in photographs. There were framed photos on the mantel. There were photo albums stacked on the coffee table. There was a large, canvas print hanging over the sofa, and everywhere I looked, I saw myself, or rather, I saw the version of myself that had grown up with money and love. I saw a girl with my nose riding a horse, her hair flying in the wind, wearing a velvet riding helmet. I saw a girl with my chin standing on the deck of a sailboat, holding a trophy. I saw a girl with my smile graduating from a university I could never have afforded, wearing a stole that signified honors. Wren Hartwell. She was 29 in that one, Conrad said, standing beside me as I stared at the photo of the sailboat. Just before she got sick, she loved the water. She could sail before she could ride a bike. I looked at the girl in the photo. She looked confident. She looked like she belonged in the world. She didn't have the permanent hunch of someone waiting to be criticized. She looks happy, I said. She was, Lila said. She picked up a silver frame from a side table. She was vibrant. She was everything. Lila turned to me, her eyes searching mine with an intensity that made me want to back away. "Do you sail, Maisie?" she asked. "No," I said. "I get seasick." A flicker of disappointment crossed Lila's face. It was gone in an instant, but I saw it. "Oh," she said. "Well, that's fine. Wren loved horses, too. We have stables about 2 miles from here. She used to spend every weekend there. Did the other family, did they let you ride?" "No," I said, thinking of the extracurriculars tab in the binder. Ballet, $3,600. Riding lessons would have probably given Gordon a stroke. It wasn't really in the budget, and I'm allergic to hay. Lila's smile faltered. She looked at Conrad, then back at me. She was looking for Wren. She was looking for the pieces of her dead daughter inside of me, and every time I said no, I was failing a test I hadn't agreed to take. "We can fix that," Conrad said. He stepped forward, his presence large and overwhelming. "The allergies, the experiences, we can fix all of that." He gestured for us to sit. I sat on the edge of a linen sofa that was probably imported from Italy. I was afraid to lean back. "Rowan told us what happened last night," Conrad said. His voice hardened. "What that man did to you, the binder, the bill." I flinched. Just hearing about it made my stomach turn. "It was effective," I said quietly. "It was monstrous," Lila said. How could anyone treat a child like a transaction?" "He isn't my father," I said. "I guess he made that clear." "No," Conrad said firmly. "He isn't, and we are not going to let you face the fallout of his cruelty alone." He reached into his jacket pocket. For a second, my heart stopped. I expected a binder. I expected a ledger. Instead, he pulled out a checkbook. "I don't know what your immediate needs are," Conrad said, "but I know you left with nothing. I know he threatened you with debt." He uncapped a pen. "I want to open an account for you today. But for now," he began to write, "I want to make sure you don't have to worry about rent, or food, or legal fees." He tore the check out and held it toward me. I looked at the number. It was $10,000. My breath hitched. My hands curled into fists in my lap. Yesterday, $10,000 would have been a lifeline. It would have been freedom. But today, after Gordon had stood in front of me and told me that every dollar spent on me was a debt I had to repay, the check didn't look like generosity. It looked like a leash. It looked like the start of a new ledger. "I can't take that," I said. My voice was shrill. I sounded ungrateful, but I couldn't help it. "Maisie, please," Lila said. "We have so much. Wren didn't get to use her trust. It's sitting there. It belongs to you." "It doesn't belong to me," I snapped. The anger flared up, hot and sudden. "I didn't earn it. I'm not her." I pointed at the photo of the girl on the boat. "I am not Wren. I don't sail. I don't ride horses. I write code, and I eat at Waffle House, and I have a panic attack when I see a spreadsheet. You can't just buy me and turn me into her." The room went silent. Lila looked stricken, her hand flying to her mouth. Conrad looked like I had slapped him. "I'm sorry," I whispered, the fight draining out of me as quickly as it had come. I can't take money. Not right now. Please don't ask me to take money." Rowan cleared her throat. She had been standing by the window, silent, watching the exchange like a referee waiting for a foul. "I think," Rowan said, walking over to the coffee table, "that this is the right time for the letter." Conrad looked at her. "Rowan, is she ready? It's been less than 24 hours. Wren was very specific," Rowan said. "She said the letter was to be delivered once the identity was confirmed and the contact was made, and considering what happened last night, I think Maisie needs to hear this." Rowan opened her briefcase, the same leather briefcase she had carried into the ambush. She pulled out a thick envelope. It was sealed with red wax. It looked old-fashioned, dramatic. "Wren knew she was dying," Rowan told me, her voice softening. "She had a lot of time to think, and she had a lot of resources to investigate." She handed me the envelope. "She hired private investigators. Maisie. She found out about the switch 6 months before she passed. She found out who you were. She found out who the Stewarts were." I took the envelope. It felt heavy. "Why didn't she contact me?" I asked. "If she knew, why didn't she come get me?" "She wanted to," Lila said, tears streaming down her face. "She wanted to drive to Matthews and knock on your door. But she was so sick. Maisie. Her immune system was gone. She couldn't leave the sterile wing of the hospital, and she was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Afraid of disrupting your life," Rowan said. "She thought you were happy. She saw the photos on social media. She didn't know the reality inside the house, until she started digging." Rowan nodded at the envelope. "Read it." I broke the wax seal. My hands were shaking. I pulled out 3 sheets of heavy cream-colored stationery. The handwriting was jagged, a little shaky, the writing of someone whose hand was weak, but the letters were pressed deep into the paper, to the sibling who got the wrong life. The greeting hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't, "Dear sister," it wasn't, "To Maisie," it was an acknowledgement of the fundamental injustice of our existence. I began to read. "If you are reading this, I am gone. I am sorry about that. I would have liked to meet you. I would have liked to see if you have our nose, or if you manage to escape the curse of the Hartwell chin. I am not going to waste this paper on sentimentality. Mom and Dad have plenty of that for both of us. They are going to try to love you, and it is going to feel overwhelming. They are going to look for me in your face. Don't let them make you me. You are you. That is enough. I am writing this because I have spent the last 3 months reading reports about Gordon Stewart." I looked up at Rowan. She nodded. "Keep reading." "My investigators tell me he is a man who measures love in decimal points. They tell me he has leveraged himself to the hilt. They tell me he has been moving money around in ways that look frantic. I don't know you, but I know predators, and I know math. Gordon is sitting on a bad investment, and he knows that eventually, the truth about us is going to come out. When it does, he is going to lose his free labor, you, and his control. He is going to try to monetize the exit." My blood ran cold. "I have set up this trust specifically to bypass him. Rowan has strict instructions. Not a penny goes to the parents who raised you. But Gordon is smart. He will try to find a loophole. He will try to create a paper trail that makes you owe him." I turned the page. "Be careful of birthdays. Be careful of milestones. If he makes a scene, if he humiliates you publicly, it is not because he hates you, it is because he needs you to sign something. He needs witnesses to validate a debt. He needs to shame you into submission so you will sign away your rights to my estate before you even know you have them." I stopped breathing. "She knew," I whispered. "She predicted the birthday party." "She predicted the strategy," Rowan said. "Wren was a corporate attorney before she got sick. She understood leverage. She knew that if Gordon found out the truth, he would treat you like a failing asset." I looked back at the letter. "Do not sign. Do not agree. Do not let him bully you with a spreadsheet. You do not owe him for the bare minimum of survival. You do not owe him for the air you breathed in his house. Take the money I am leaving you, not because it is a gift, but because it is a weapon. Use it to get free. Use it to bury him in legal fees if you have to. I got the sailboats and the horses and the dying young. You got the struggle and the bad parents and the long life. It is not fair. None of it is fair, but it is what we have. Live a good life, sister, and give them hell. Ren. I lowered the letter. The room was silent, but the quality of the silence had changed again. It wasn't mournful anymore. It was electric. I looked at Conrad. He was watching me, waiting. I looked at the check for $10,000 that was still sitting on the coffee table where I had ignored it. He didn't just snap, I said, my voice steady for the first time in 24 hours. Gordon? He didn't just lose his temper. It was a play. It was a calculated maneuver, Rowan agreed. He staged the audience to pressure you. He created the binder to justify the debt. He wanted you to feel so worthless that you would sign that promissory note just to make the clapping stop. I looked at the photo of Ren on the sailboat. She wasn't just a girl who rode horses. She was sharp. She was cynical. She was my sister. And she had reached across the divide of death to hand me the playbook. I looked at Conrad. I won't take the check, I said. Conrad's face fell. But, I continued, I will take the help. I need a forensic accountant. I need to know exactly what Gordon did with my name, and I need to know how to stop him. Rowan smiled. It was the first time I had seen a genuine smile on her face. It was sharp, dangerous, and approving. Now you're talking like a Hartwell, she said. I looked at the letter one last time. Give them hell. Okay, I said to the room. Let's bury him. We set up a command center in the Hartwell's library. It felt blasphemous to clutter the mahogany table, which was probably older than the United States, with my cheap laptop and a tangle of charging cables. But Conrad insisted. He said he wanted to see the fight happen in his house. He wanted to watch. Rowan Pike did not waste time with pleasantries. She treated my identity like a crime scene she was securing. We are going to pull everything, she said, her fingers flying across her keyboard. Equifax, TransUnion, Experian, and then we are going to look at check systems. If Gordon used your social security number to open a lemonade stand, I want to know about it. I sat next to her, watching the progress bar load on the screen. It was a surreal feeling, waiting to see the digital footprint of a life I hadn't lived. I knew my credit score. I checked it on free apps like everyone else. It was usually a respectable 720. I paid my car note. I paid my student loans. I was boring. Okay, Rowan said, the screen flashing white as the full report populated. Here we go. She scrolled past the things I recognized, the student loans, the auto finance, the credit card with a $2,000 limit I used for groceries. Stop, I said, pointing at the screen. What is that? Rowan highlighted the line item. Commercial line of credit. Creditor, Bayside Regional Bank. Opened, February 14th, 2023. Balance, $75,000. I don't have a commercial line of credit, I said. My voice sounded hollow. I don't have a business. According to this, Rowan said, clicking on the detail view, you are the sole proprietor of a company called MS Ventures, and you borrowed $75,000 to fund initial operations. February, I whispered. That was right after I got promoted. Gordon asked for my pay stubs. He said he wanted to help me set up a retirement account. He said he needed to verify my tax withholding. I felt a cold flush of shame. I had handed him my documents. I had thanked him for helping me. Rowan was already digging deeper. She pulled up the payment history for the loan. The payments are current, she noted. Someone is paying $1,200 a month to keep this loan in good standing. Let's see where the payments are coming from. She traced the routing number. It didn't lead to a Stewart family account. It led to another entity, a shell company with the aggressively bland name of Blue Spruce Holdings. Blue Spruce, Rowan muttered. Let's see who owns Blue Spruce. She logged into a different database, one that required a two-factor authentication key she kept on a USB drive. A few minutes of silence passed, broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Got you, she whispered. She turned the laptop toward me. Blue Spruce Holdings is registered to a P.O. box in Matthews. The registered agent is a man named Arthur Miller. Arthur Miller? I frowned. Like the playwright? No, I said, a memory surfacing from the murky waters of my childhood. Arthur Miller. He worked with Gordon at the insurance firm. They used to play racquetball. He came to our 4th of July barbecues. He always smelled like peppermint schnapps. Well, Rowan said, Arthur is the front man for the company that is paying off the loan taken out in your name. It is a circle. Maisie, Gordon takes the loan using your credit, funneling the cash to himself. Then he uses a shell company to make the minimum payments, so you don't get alerted by a collections call. He gets a lump sum of $75,000 tax-free, and you get the liability. Why? I asked. He has money, the house, the cars. Does he? Rowan asked. She opened another tab. I ran a property search on the Elmwood Drive house this morning. She showed me the deed history. Refinance, March 10th, 2025. Cash out amount, $120,000. He stripped the equity, Rowan said. He refinanced the house to the hilt less than a year ago. And look at this transfer. She pointed to a wire transfer record linked to the refinancing. He moved $50,000 to an account in the Caymans the day after the refinance closed. He is liquidity poor. Maisie, he is moving money around like a man playing musical chairs who knows the music is about to stop. I stared at the screen. The Gordon Stewart I knew preached fiscal conservatism. He clipped coupons. He lectured me on turning off lights to save electricity. And all the while, he was running a Ponzi scheme with his own family's assets. He knew, I realized. He knew the Hartwell estate lawyers were sniffing around. He knew Wren had died. He was liquidating everything he could before the truth came out. He was preparing for a divorce, Rowan corrected. A divorce from you. He wanted to extract maximum value from the asset, you, before he discarded it. I felt sick, but the sickness was different now. It wasn't grief. It was anger. It was a cold, hard rage that settled in my chest. What about the DNA test? I asked. The paper he waved around? Can we prove he faked it? Oh, he didn't fake the results, Rowan said. You aren't his daughter, but he didn't go through a doctor. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a photocopy of the lab report Gordon had used. I called the lab this morning, Rowan said. I pretended to be his executive assistant asking for a copy of the invoice. They were very helpful. She tapped the header of the report. The ordering physician is listed as Dr. James P. O'Malley. I don't know a doctor. O'Malley, I said. Gordon does, Rowan said. He is an orthopedic surgeon. He fixed Gordon's knee in 2010, and coincidentally, he is currently being investigated by the medical board for signing prescriptions for friends. So Gordon called in a favor, I said. He bypassed the genetic counselor, Rowan said. He bypassed the hospital protocols. He got a friend to run a sample, probably hair from your hairbrush or saliva from a glass you left at the house, and give him the raw data. He wanted the answer, but he didn't want the official paper trail that would alert the state or the hospital. Why? Because, Rowan said, leaning back, if the hospital finds out they swapped 2 babies 30 years ago, they don't just send a sorry card. They launch an internal investigation. They call the lawyers, and Gordon didn't want the hospital involved. He wanted to control the timeline. He wanted to use the information as a weapon against you, not as a tool for justice. We need the hospital records, I said. We need to prove how it happened. If we are going to fight him, I need to know, was it just an accident? Let's find out, Rowan said. She put the phone on speaker. She dialed the records department of Matthews General Hospital. Records, this is Brenda. Hi, Brenda, Rowan said, her voice shifting into a pleasant, bureaucratic lilt. This is Maisie Stewart. I am calling to request a copy of my full birth record from October 14th, 1995, including the nursery logs and the discharge ID verification. Date of birth? Brenda asked, sounding bored. October 14th, 1995. We heard the clicking of a keyboard, then a pause, a long pause. Honey, I am seeing a flag on that date, Brenda said. We had a server migration in 2002. A lot of the files from 95 are, well, they are listed as corrupted. Corrupted, Rowan repeated, her eyes narrowing. All of them? Just that week, Brenda said. Weird, right? And the physical copies. Let me check the archive log. Another pause. Yeah, looks like those boxes were marked as water damage during the flood we had in the basement back in 2010. I can give you a certificate of live birth. But the detailed nursing notes? Those are gone. Rowan signaled for me to stay quiet. That is unfortunate, Rowan said. Is there anyone who worked the floor that night who might still be on staff? We are trying to clear up a discrepancy with insurance. From 95? Brenda laughed. Honey, nobody lasts that long on L&D. They are all retired or dead. Rowan hung up. Water damage, she scoffed. And a server migration that only corrupted 1 week of data. That isn't bad luck. Maisie, that is a cover-up. So we hit a wall, I said, feeling the frustration rise. No, Rowan said. We hit a detour. When the paper trail disappears, you have to find the people. That afternoon, Rowan's email pinged. She had set up a Google alert for Matthews General Hospital 1995 and Stuart Baby immediately after the party. Hoping that someone from the 78 guests would leak the story online, they had, a cousin, probably the one who smirked, had posted a vague, dramatic status update about family secrets and shocking DNA results on a local community forum. But the email wasn't from a cousin. It was from a woman named Maribel Knox. Subject, the birthday girl. Message, I saw the post on the Matthews community board. I don't know who you are, but if you are the lawyer for the girl who was told she didn't belong, we need to talk. I was the charge nurse on the night shift. October 14th, 1995. I didn't forget. We met her at a diner 3 towns over. It was a neutral ground, far away from the prying eyes of the Stewart social circle. Maribel Knox was in her late 60s, with steel gray hair cut short and hands that shook slightly as she held her cigarette. She wore a heavy wool coat. Even though it wasn't that cold inside, she looked like a woman who had spent 30 years looking over her shoulder. She didn't order food. She just ordered black tea. You're the girl, she said, looking at me. Her eyes were kind but tired. You look like the other mother, the one who cried so much. Lila, I said. Lila, Maribel nodded. She was a sweet thing, tiny, terrified. She took a sip of tea. I didn't switch you, she said, her voice firm. I want to be clear about that. I didn't do it. We believe you, Rowan said. But we need to know how it happened. Maribel sighed. She put her cup down. It was a full moon, she said. I know that sounds like a superstition, but in labor and delivery, it is a fact. The ward was overflowing. We had 4 emergency C-sections in 2 hours. We were short-staffed. 2 nurses called in sick with the flu. She looked at her hands. The protocol was simple. Baby comes out, baby gets a bracelet, mom gets a bracelet, numbers match. But that night, it was chaos. Code blue in room 3, hemorrhage in room 5, the supervisor, a woman named Beverly. She was running around like a headless chicken. Maribel leaned in closer. I came on shift at 7 p.m. You were already in the nursery. So was the other baby, the Hartwell baby. You were in bassinets next to each other. Both girls, both around 7 pounds, both crying. And? I asked. And I noticed the tags, Maribel said. The ankle tags. They were loose. The plastic clasps we used back then. They were cheap. The hospital was cutting costs. I saw one of the tags lying on the blanket in your bassinet. It had fallen off. I held my breath. I picked it up, Maribel said. I went to check the other baby. Her tag was loose too. I didn't know which tag belonged to which baby. I didn't want to guess, so I called Beverly. I told her, We have a problem. The IDs are compromised. We need to reprint them. We need to do footprints again to match them to the mothers." "What did she say?" Rowan asked. Maribel let out a bitter laugh. "She told me we didn't have time. She told me the Hartwells were high-profile donors, and they were already complaining about the wait time to see their baby. She told me the Stewarts were threatening to sue because their room wasn't ready." Maribel's voice dropped to a whisper. "She walked over to the bassinets. She looked at you. She looked at the other baby. She picked up the tag from the blanket. She looked at me and said, 'This one looks like a Stewart. Put it on her.'" "She guessed?" I said, horrified. "She just guessed?" "She didn't want the paperwork," Maribel said. "She didn't want to admit we had lost track of the identities. It would have been a scandal. It would have cost the hospital millions. So she made an executive decision. She assigned you an identity based on nothing." "And you?" Rowan asked gently. "I argued," Maribel said. "I told her we couldn't do that. She told me that if I filed a report, she would fire me for negligence. She said she would blame me for the tags falling off. I was 24. I needed the job. I had a toddler at home." Tears welled up in Maribel's eyes. "I put the tag on you," she said to me. "I handed you to Patrice Stewart. She looked at you and said, 'Oh, she doesn't look anything like Gordon,' and I stood there and said nothing. I filed a complaint 6 months later," Maribel continued, wiping her eyes, "anonymously, to the ethics board, about the tags, about the lax procedures. I didn't mention the specific babies because I was scared, but I mentioned the risk." "What happened?" I asked. "I got transferred to geriatrics 2 weeks later," Maribel said, "and then my hours got cut. And then I got encouraged to take early retirement. They buried it, just like they buried those records in the basement." She reached into her purse and pulled out a faded, yellowing piece of paper. It was a carbon copy of a handwritten note. "I kept this," she said. "It is my personal log from that night, October 14th. It says right here, 2000 hours, IDs detached, Supervisor B, instructed to retag without verification, protested." She slid the paper across the table to Rowan. "I saw the news about the birthday party," Maribel said. "I saw what those people did to you, and I thought, 30 years is long enough to keep a secret for a hospital that doesn't even exist under the same name anymore." Rowan picked up the paper. She looked at it like it was the Holy Grail. "This is admissible," Rowan said. "This is a contemporaneous record. This proves it wasn't just a mistake. Maisie, it was gross negligence. And the cover-up?" Rowan looked at me, her eyes hard. "The cover-up involves the hospital. It involves the supervisor. And if Gordon knew, if he found out later and joined in the cover-up to protect his investment or his pride." "He knew," I said. "He must have suspected. That's why he kept the receipts. He wasn't tracking a child. He was building a case for a refund on a defective product. This wasn't fate," I said, looking at the faded ink on the nurse's log. "It wasn't some cosmic accident. It was just people covering their own asses." "And now," Rowan said, folding the paper carefully and putting it in her pocket, "we are going to expose them all." She looked at Maribel. "Will you testify?" Rowan asked. Maribel took a drag of her cigarette, her hand finally steady. "Honey," she said, "I have been waiting 30 years to tell that woman Beverly she can go to hell. Just tell me when and where." I looked out the window of the diner. The world looked the same as it had an hour ago. Cars driving by, people walking their dogs. But everything had changed. The mystery of my life, the feeling of not belonging, the constant criticism from Gordon. It wasn't because I was flawed. It wasn't because I wasn't good enough. It was because a woman named Beverly didn't want to fill out paperwork. And because Gordon Stewart didn't want to raise a child he couldn't profit from. "Let's go," I said to Rowan. "We have work to do." I thought the silence after the birthday party would be the hardest part. I was wrong. The noise was worse. It started on a Thursday morning. 3 days after I had walked out of my parents' house, I was staying in a guest suite at the Hartwell estate. a space that smelled of lemon polish and safety, but I could not hide from the digital world. My phone pinged at 6 in the morning. It was a notification from the extended Stewart family email chain, a list usually reserved for reunion planning and updates on Aunt Carol's hip surgery. The subject line read, "A prayer for our family." I opened it, my stomach tightening. Dear family and friends, it breaks my heart to air private grievances. But given the rumors circulating, I feel I must speak the truth. As many of you know, our daughter Maisie has chosen to leave our home under difficult circumstances. We recently discovered painful truths about her origins, and instead of leaning on the family that raised her, she has chosen to lash out. Maisie is currently under the influence of people who do not have her best interests at heart. She is targeting the Hartwell family in what appears to be a misguided attempt to secure financial gain. Worse, she is extorting us, her grieving parents, by threatening legal action after we simply asked her to take responsibility for her adult life. We pray for her return to sanity. Until then, please be cautious if she contacts you for money. Love, Gordon and Patrice. I stared at the screen, the breath trapped in my throat. Extorting them? I was extorting them? Gordon had flipped the narrative so fast it gave me whiplash. He knew the story of the binder would get out. He knew the 78 witnesses would talk. So he was preempting the truth. He was painting me as a greedy, unstable opportunist who was attacking the poor. Wealthy Hartwells and the poor. Devoted Stewarts. He is good, Rowan said when I showed her the email over breakfast. She didn't look angry. She looked focused. He is inoculating the witnesses. If they believe you are the aggressor, they won't testify about the ambush. He told them I am targeting the Hartwells, I said, feeling a surge of nausea. I am staying in their house. Conrad bought me these pajamas. It is a classic deflection, Rowan said. But stay off the email. Do not reply. If you defend yourself, you look guilty. If you stay silent, you look dignified. I tried to stay dignified, but Gordon was not fighting a war of dignity. He was fighting a war of attrition. I drove to Kestrel Bridge Solutions an hour later. I needed normalcy. I needed to look at code and forget that my father was running a smear campaign against me. I swiped my badge, walked to my cubicle, and turned on my monitors. I had been there 10 minutes when my manager, David, appeared at my desk. David was a good guy. He wore cargo shorts to work and brought donuts on Fridays. But today, he wasn't smiling. He wasn't holding a donut box. He was holding a file folder, and he looked uncomfortable. Maisie, he said, can we chat in my office? Now. The walk to his office felt like the walk to the execution spot in the Stewart living room. I sat down, and David closed the door. He didn't sit behind his desk. He leaned against it, crossing his arms. We got a call this morning, David said. From your mother. I froze. Patrice called here? She called the main HR line, David said. She was crying. She told them she was worried about your mental state. She said you were having a breakdown. She mentioned something about erratic behavior and substance abuse issues stemming from a family crisis. That is a lie, I said, my voice rising. David, I don't do drugs. I don't have a substance abuse problem. My parents and I are estranged. They are trying to hurt me. David held up a hand. I know you. Maisie, you are my best analyst, but HR takes these things seriously, especially when a parent calls claiming you might be a danger to yourself or the company data. He looked at the floor. We are in the middle of the promotion cycle, he said quietly. The VP is reviewing the candidates for the senior lead position next week. If there is a red flag on your file, even a bogus one, they are going to pass you over. They want stability. So my mother just cost me the promotion, I said. She put it in jeopardy, David corrected. I told them it was a personal matter. But Maisie, you need to lock this down. If she calls again, or if you bring this drama into the office, I can't protect you. I left his office shaking. Patrice, the woman who used to pack my lunch. The woman who sat silently while Gordon presented me with a bill. She wasn't just passive anymore. She was active. She was making calls. She was trying to destroy the one thing that gave me independence, my career. I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. I looked in the mirror. Don't cry. I told myself, if you cry, they win. If you break down, you prove them right. I went back to my desk and worked for 8 hours. I wrote code with a ferocity that scared me. I fixed bugs that had been plaguing the system for months. I didn't take a lunch break. I didn't talk to anyone. I channeled every ounce of rage into productivity, because if I stopped, I would scream. When I got back to the Hartwell estate that evening, I opened my laptop to check social media. I knew I shouldn't, but it is like picking a scab. You have to know how deep the wound is. My cousin Brad, the one who had smirked, the one who owed Gordon money, had posted a status update on Facebook. It is sad when people turn their backs on the family that raised them just because they sniff a little money. Loyalty isn't for sale. Family first, ungrateful. The comments were a cesspool. People I barely knew, people who had been at the party, were chiming in. So true. Brad, I was shocked by her attitude. Money changes people. I heard she screamed at her poor mother. I was a headline in my own town. The girl who sold out her parents. The girl who traded loyalty for a check. They didn't know about the binder. They didn't know about the shell company. They just knew the story Gordon had fed them. The grieving parents and the greedy changeling. Don't engage, Rowan said, walking into the library where I was doom-scrolling. She gently closed my laptop lid. He wants you to reply. He wants you to post a rant defending yourself. Then he can print it out and show it to a judge and say, "Look, she is unstable. Look, she is irrational." It is unfair, I said. They are lying to everyone. The truth has a way of correcting the record, Rowan said, but it happens in court, not on Facebook. Speaking of the truth, I took a closer look at the binder. She pulled the black binder, the cost report, out of her bag. She opened it to a page she had flagged with a red sticky note. Gordon claims this is a strict accounting of expenses, Rowan said. But look at this entry. 2010, dental surgery, wisdom teeth removal. He listed the cost as $4,500. That sounds right, I said. I remember it being expensive. I pulled the insurance records from his old provider, Rowan said. He had a copay of $200. The insurance covered 90%. He is charging you the gross amount. Maisie, he is charging you for money he never spent. She flipped to another page. And the interest he calculated? He applied a compounding interest rate starting from the date of the expense. That is illegal. You can't charge interest on a minor's living expenses. It is usury. It is fraud. So the debt is fake, I said. The debt is fiction, Rowan confirmed. But here is the interesting part. Gordon is telling everyone the binder was symbolic. He is telling your Aunt Carol that he never intended to collect, that it was just a way to show you the gravity of the situation. He told me to sign or get out, I said. Exactly. And he is still trying. Rowan slid a piece of paper across the table. It was an email from a mediation firm in Charlotte. He contacted them today, Rowan said. He wants to set up a family reconciliation meeting. He says he wants to put this behind us, but the agenda includes formalizing the separation agreement. He is trying to get you in a room without lawyers to sign that promissory note. He is desperate. Why? I asked. If he knows I have you, if he knows I have the Hartwells, why is he still pushing? Because he is cornered, Rowan said. He spent the money he stole from your identity. He stripped the equity from his house. If he doesn't get a signature from you validating that debt, or if he doesn't get access to the Hartwell Trust through you, his house of cards falls down. He isn't just cruel. Maisie, he is broke. The phone rang. It was Maribel Knox. Rowan put it on speaker. Maribel? Rowan asked. Everything okay? I got a letter, Maribel said. Her voice was shaking. It wasn't the steady, defiant voice from the diner. It was the voice of an old woman who lived alone. FedEx, just now. Read it to me, Rowan said. her face tightening. "It is from a law firm," Maribel said. "Stratton and Vance. It says that if I violate my non-disclosure agreement with the hospital, or if I slander the reputation of the Stewart family, I will be sued for damages. It says they will come after my pension. They will come after my house." "You don't have a non-disclosure agreement," Rowan said. "You were a nurse in 1995. Nobody signed ND. As back then." "It says I did," Maribel whispered. "It says they have a copy. Rowan, I can't lose my pension. It is all I have." Rowan's eyes went cold. "Stratton and Vance. That is a high-end corporate defense firm. They charge $800 an hour." "Gordon can't afford them," I said. "You just said he is broke." "He can't afford them," Rowan agreed. "Which means someone else is paying the bill. Someone who is terrified of what Maribel knows." "The hospital?" I guessed. "Or the supervisor," Rowan said. "Or maybe Gordon found a way to take out another loan in your name." Rowan spoke into the phone. "Maribel, listen to me. Do not reply. Do not call them. This is a scare tactic. It is a bullying move. I will handle Stratton and Vance. You are protected. You are a whistleblower. They can't touch you." "Are you sure?" Maribel asked. "I am sure," Rowan said. "I am coming over there right now to pick up that letter. Lock your door." Rowan hung up. She stood up and grabbed her keys. "He is escalating," she said. "He attacked your reputation. He attacked your job. Now he is attacking our witnesses. He is trying to isolate you. He wants you to feel like everyone who helps you gets hurt." "It is working," I said quietly. "My manager hates me. My family hates me. And now Maribel is terrified." Rowan stopped at the door. She looked back at me. "That is the point," she said. "He wants you to fold. He wants you to call him and say, 'Okay, Dad, I will sign the paper. Just make it stop.' That is his win condition." She opened the door. "But he forgot one thing," Rowan said. "Cornered animals are dangerous. Yes, but so are the people hunting them. Stay here. Don't answer the phone." She left. I sat in the library, surrounded by the silence of the Hartwell house. I thought about the binder. I thought about the fake numbers. I thought about the symbolic debt that Gordon was willing to destroy my life to collect. He wasn't acting like a father. He wasn't even acting like a disgruntled creditor. He was acting like a criminal who knew the police were circling the block. I opened my laptop again. I didn't go to Facebook. I went to my bank account. The new one Conrad had helped me set up, separate from anything Gordon could touch. It was empty, save for the initial deposit. Then I logged into the credit monitoring site Rowan had shown me. I looked at the MS Ventures loan, the one Gordon had opened in my name. There was a new activity alert. Inquiry: Stratton and Vance Legal Services. Reason: credit check. I stared at the screen. Gordon hadn't paid for the lawyers. He had used the shell company, the company in my name, to retain the firm that was threatening Maribel. He was using my own stolen identity to pay for the lawyers he hired to silence the woman who could prove he stole my identity. The audacity of it took my breath away. It was a perfect, vicious circle, but it was also a mistake, because now I had a direct link between the harassment of a witness and the financial fraud. I printed the page. The printer hummed, a low, mechanical sound that felt like a growl. Gordon Stewart wanted a war? He wanted to play dirty? He thought he was fighting a daughter who just wanted her daddy to love her. He thought he was fighting a scared girl who would crumble at the first sign of disapproval. He didn't realize he was fighting a woman who had nothing left to lose. I picked up the printed page. I didn't need a mediator. I didn't need an apology. I needed a prosecutor. And thanks to his latest move, I finally had the evidence to get one. The week leading up to the mediation felt less like waiting for a meeting and more like watching a demolition crew set charges around the foundation of a building. The building was my past, and the person holding the detonator was Rowan Pike. We did not go back to Matthews. We stayed in the Hartwell Library. which had been transformed into a war room. Rowan had brought in a forensic accountant named Silas, a man who spoke in a whisper and looked at spreadsheets the way other people look at religious texts. "He is sloppy," Silas said on Tuesday morning, pointing a pen at a complex web of transactions on his monitor. "Your father, Mr. Stewart, is arrogant. He moved money between the Blue Spruce Shell Company and his personal checking account using integers, round numbers, 5,000 here, 10,000 there. He didn't even try to make it look like business expenses." "He thought no one would look," I said. "He thought I would sign the promissory note, take the debt, and be too scared to audit him." "Exactly," Rowan said. She was organizing a stack of files 3 inches thick. "He was counting on your compliance. He banked on the fact that you have been trained for 30 years to never question his math." She slapped a folder onto the table. "Well," she said, "we are questioning it now. I filed a motion this morning to freeze the assets of M.S. Ventures, pending an investigation into identity theft. I also alerted the probate court that there is a contesting claim on your identity regarding the Hartwell estate." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means Gordon can't hide the money anymore," Rowan said, "and it means he's going to panic." She was right. By 2 o'clock that afternoon, Gordon's lawyer, a junior associate from Stratton and Vance, clearly the B team sent to handle the domestic squabble, called Rowan. Gordon wanted a meeting. "He calls it a closure session," Rowan told me, covering the mouthpiece of her phone. "He wants to meet privately, just you, him, and Patrice, no lawyers. He says he wants to heal the wound before it festers." I felt a phantom weight on my chest, the familiar pressure of Gordon's disappointment. "He wants to guilt me," I said. "He wants to get me in a room and tell me I am destroying the family." "I know," Rowan said. She uncovered the phone. "Mr. Henderson?" "No, absolutely not. My client will not be meeting with Mr. Stewart privately. We will agree to a mediation. But it will be recorded, it will be transcribed, and it will be held in a neutral conference room in Charlotte. Take it or leave it." There was a long pause on the other end. "They took it," Rowan said, hanging up. "Thursday, 10 a.m. Wear something that makes you feel armored." Thursday morning was gray and rainy. The conference room in downtown Charlotte was sterile, smelling of lemon polish and stale coffee. It was a glass box high above the city, designed for corporate mergers, not family dissections. Gordon and Patrice were already there when we arrived. They sat on one side of the long mahogany table. Gordon was wearing a navy suit, the one he wore to funerals. He looked tired, his skin was gray, and there were bags under his eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. Patrice sat next to him, looking at her hands, just like she had at the party. I sat opposite them. Rowan sat to my right. Silas sat to my left, his laptop open and humming. "Maisie," Gordon said. His voice was thick with emotion. It was a good performance. It was the voice of a father who had been wronged. "I am glad you came. We have been so worried. We are here to discuss the separation of assets and the allegations of fraud." Rowan cut in, her voice sharp. "Let's skip the pleasantries." Gordon flinched. He looked at me, ignoring Rowan. "I know you are angry," he said to me. "I know the birthday party was dramatic, but you have to understand. We were in shock. We had just found out that the daughter we raised wasn't ours. We were trying to protect our future. We were trying to ensure fairness." "Fairness?" I asked. My voice shook, but I forced myself to look him in the eye. "You presented me with a bill for $300,000. Gordon, you packed my bags. That isn't fairness. That is an eviction." "It was a negotiation tactic," Gordon said, leaning forward. "I never intended to collect every penny. I just wanted you to understand the gravity of the situation. I wanted you to understand that resources are finite," he sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "Look," he said, "we can drop the debt. I am willing to tear up the promissory note, right here, right now. We can forget the binder." "That is generous," Rowan said dryly, "considering the debt is illegal." I am offering a compromise, Gordon continued, still looking at me. I will drop the claim for reimbursement. In exchange, you sign a statement acknowledging that I acted as your financial advisor in good faith for the last 5 years. You acknowledge that the loans taken out in your name were part of a joint investment strategy that we agreed upon verbally. I stared at him. He wanted me to retroactively approve his crimes. He wanted me to sign a paper that said, yes. I told him to steal my identity. Why? I asked. Why do you need that statement? Because of the Hartwell Trust, Gordon said. He lowered his voice, as if he were sharing a secret. You are coming into a lot of money, Maisie. The Wren Hartwell Equine Trust alone is worth $2 million. And the liquidity in the portfolio. Rowan slammed her hand on the table. The sound cracked like a gunshot. Stop, she commanded. Gordon froze. How do you know about the Equine Trust? Rowan asked. Her voice was deadly quiet. Gordon blinked. It is public record. No, it isn't, Rowan said. She stood up. The Wren Hartwell Equine Trust is a private, irrevocable trust. It is not part of the public probate file. The only people who know the specific name and value of that asset are the executors, me, and the beneficiaries, which means you haven't just been checking public records. Gordon, you have been accessing the Hartwell estate files. Gordon's face went pale. I might have heard it, he stammered. People talk. People don't talk about sealed trusts, Rowan said. You used Maisie's social security number to access the beneficiary portal, didn't you? You logged in as her. You have been tracking her inheritance because you are trying to figure out exactly how much you can bleed from her. That is absurd, Gordon spat. I am her father. I have a right to know if she's being taken care of. You aren't her father, I said. You made that very clear when you handed me a bill for my childhood. Gordon's eyes narrowed. The grieving father mask slipped, revealing the cornered rat beneath. You are ungrateful, he hissed. I built you. I paid for those teeth. I paid for that degree. And now you think you can just walk away with a fortune that belongs to a stranger and leave us with nothing? It doesn't belong to you, Gordon, Rowan said. And neither does she. Gordon stood up. This is a trap. I am leaving. There is no evidence of any wrongdoing. Just the ramblings of a confused girl and a predatory lawyer. Actually, Rowan said, we have a little bit more than that. She pulled a USB drive from her pocket and plugged it into the conference room's projection system. We received an email yesterday, Rowan said, from a guest at your party, a teenager. Kids these days, they film everything, don't they? She clicked play. The video was shaky, filmed vertically from behind a potted plant, but the audio was crystal clear. It showed Gordon standing in the living room, the binder in his hand. Video Gordon. We funded a stranger. Now the stranger needs to take responsibility. Video Gordon. Sign it, and we can discuss a transition period. If you don't, you are a thief. Video Gordon. Everything else, everything purchased with Stewart funds, stays here. The car, the phone. Rowan paused the video. That, she said, is extortion. You threatened to seize her property and leave her destitute unless she signed a fraudulent debt instrument in front of 78 witnesses. Gordon was trembling. That was heat of the moment. It proves nothing about the loans. No, Rowan agreed. The video doesn't prove the financial fraud, but Gary does. She pointed to the door. The door opened. A man walked in. He was balding, wearing a suit that was one size too big, and he was sweating profusely. He was clutching a plastic grocery bag. It was Gary, my Aunt Carol's boyfriend, the man who did everyone's taxes for $50, the man Gordon used for light filing. Gary? Gordon whispered. He looked like he had been punched in the gut. What are you doing here? Gary didn't look at Gordon. He looked at the floor. He looked at me. I'm sorry. Maisie, Gary mumbled. I didn't know he was going to do that to you at the party. I thought it was just business. Sit down, Gary, Rowan said gently. Gary sat. He put the grocery bag on the table. He pulled out a stack of papers. They were emails, hundreds of them. Mr. Stewart told me to delete the server. Gary said to the room. Last night, he called me and said, wipe the blue spruce correspondence, wipe the M.S. Ventures drafts. He said if I didn't, I would go down with him. Gary wiped his forehead with a handkerchief. But I can't go to jail, he said, his voice cracking. I have a dog. I have Carol. I can't go to federal prison for bank fraud. He pushed the stack of papers toward Silas. It is all there, Gary said. The emails where he asked me to forge Maisie's signature on the loan application. The emails where he discussed how to structure the payments so the IRS wouldn't flag them. The email where he called it the retirement plan. I looked at the top email. From Gordon Stewart. To Gary Miller. Subject, Re-M.S. Ventures Setup. Date, January 15th, 2023. Gary, just use the old signature from her college tuition forms. She never checks her credit. We need that $75,000 to cover the margin call on the house. We can frame it as a consulting business if anyone asks. She is pliable. If she finds out, we can guilt her into accepting it. She is pliable, I read aloud. I looked at Gordon. He had collapsed into his chair. The fight had gone out of him. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at the stack of emails, the paper trail of his own greed. I trusted you, I said. I defended you to my friends when they said you were too hard on me. I thought you were just strict. I didn't know you were a monster. Gordon didn't speak. Rowan stood up and closed the folder. We are done here, she said. We have the forensic audit. We have the video. We have the whistleblower testimony from the hospital nurse regarding the initial switch. And now, we have the co-conspirator turning state's evidence. She looked at Gordon's lawyer, the young associate, who looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. We will see you at the probate hearing on Monday, Rowan said. We will be filing for a full restoration of Maisie's identity as a Hartwell, and we will be submitting this evidence to the district attorney's office regarding the identity theft. Gordon looked up. His eyes were wet. Patrice, he croaked. Patrice, tell them. Patrice stood up. She looked at Gordon, then she looked at me. For a second, I thought she might apologize. I thought she might finally be the mother I remembered. I didn't know about the emails, she said quietly. She grabbed her purse. I have to go, she said, and she walked out. She didn't look back at Gordon. She didn't look at me. She just walked out to save herself, leaving her husband in the wreckage he had built for both of them. Gordon sat alone at the table, surrounded by the ghosts of his schemes. Come on, Maisie, Rowan said. We walked out of the conference room. We walked past Gary, who was weeping into his hands. We walked into the hallway and pressed the button for the elevator. When the doors closed, isolating us in the quiet steel box, I let out a breath I'd been holding for 3 days. He is finished, Rowan said. That was checkmate. He looked so small, I said. He used to look like a giant to me. Predators always look small when you take away their teeth, Rowan said. The elevator dinged. We walked out into the lobby. Through the glass doors, I could see the city of Charlotte, gray and wet under the rain. But it didn't look gloomy to me. It looked clean. Monday, I said. The probate hearing. Monday, Rowan confirmed. It is the final step. The judge will legally recognize your paternity. You will officially be Maisie Hartwell, and the Stewart claim on you will be severed permanently. I nodded. I thought about the binder. I thought about the Waffle House. I thought about Wren's letter. Give them hell. I wasn't shaking anymore. My hands were steady. I am ready, I said, and for the first time in 30 years. I knew exactly who was saying it. Not the girl who owed a debt, not the girl who was an investment, but the woman who had survived the crash and walked out of the wreckage holding the black box. The probate court smelled of floor wax, pine cleaner, and the stale residue of 1,000 dissolved marriages. It was a sterile room, devoid of the warmth of a home, but to me, it felt like a sanctuary. This was where the truth would finally be etched into the public record. Immune to Gordon Stewart's creative accounting. Gordon arrived 10 minutes late. He walked in with Patrice and a new attorney, a man with slicked-back hair and a suit that looked expensive but fit poorly. Gordon was not wearing the arrogant expression he had worn at the birthday party. He was wearing the mask of the victim. His shoulders were slumped. He walked with a slight limp I had never seen before. He looked at the judge, then at the gallery, with wide, watery eyes, as if asking the world to witness how his ungrateful daughter was crucifying him. He did not look at me. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Rowan Pike. On my other side sat Conrad and Lila Hartwell. They did not touch me, but their presence was a solid wall of heat and support. They were the reinforcements I never knew I had. "All rise," the bailiff called out. Judge Deborah Vance took the bench. She was a woman in her 60s with sharp glasses and a face that suggested she had heard every lie a human being was capable of telling. She opened the file in front of her, the pages rustling in the quiet room. "We are here regarding the estate of Wren Hartwell," Judge Vance said, her voice dry, "and the petition to amend the heirship based on genetic testing and identity verification. I also have a counter-motion filed by Mr. Gordon Stewart regarding reimbursement of child-rearing costs." She peered over her glasses at Gordon. Gordon's new lawyer stood up. "Yes, Your Honor, my client, Mr. Stewart, asserts that while the genetic results are unfortunate, the financial reality is undeniable. For 30 years, the Stewarts provided housing, education, and medical care to a child who was, effectively, a squatter in their lineage. Now that Ms. Stewart, or Ms. Hartwell, as she claims, is set to inherit a significant fortune, it is only equitable that the Stewarts be reimbursed for their investment." Gordon nodded solemnly beside him. He dabbed his eyes with a handkerchief. "We loved her," Gordon said, speaking out of turn. "We sacrificed for her, and now she is being purchased by the Hartwell family. They are buying her loyalty with a trust fund, and she is leaving us with the bill." "Purchased?" I whispered. The word tasted like bile. Rowan placed a hand on my arm to steady me. She stood up. She didn't look angry. She looked like a surgeon picking up a scalpel. "Your Honor," Rowan said, "the Stewarts did not act out of benevolence. They acted out of calculation, and we have evidence that this claim for reimbursement is not a request for fairness. It is the continuation of an extortion scheme." "Extortion is a heavy word. Counselor," Judge Vance said, "we have the receipt, Your Honor," Rowan said. "And the video." She signaled to the clerk. The video from the birthday party began to play on the monitors mounted on the walls. The courtroom watched in silence as the grainy footage played. They saw the 78 guests standing like a jury. They saw the binder. They heard Gordon's voice, clear and cold, cutting through the speakers. Video. Gordon. "We funded a stranger. Now the stranger needs to take responsibility." Video Gordon. "Sign it, or leave." I watched Gordon's face as the video played. He turned a deep, mottled shade of red. He whispered furiously to his lawyer, gesturing at the screen. "That was a private family dispute," his lawyer argued weakly. "It was emotional." "It was an ultimatum," Rowan corrected. "Sign a fraudulent debt instrument or be thrown onto the street, and it was designed to hide this," Rowan called Silas, the forensic accountant, to the stand. Silas walked up with his laptop. He didn't look at Gordon. He looked at the judge. "Can you explain your findings regarding Mr. Stewart's finances?" Rowan asked. "Yes," Silas said. "I tracked a series of loans taken out in the name of Maisie Stewart starting in January of 2023. The total principal amount is $75,000. The loans were secured using Ms. Stewart's social security number and a forged signature." "And where did the money go?" Judge Vance asked, leaning forward. "It was funneled through a shell company called Blue Spruce Holdings," Silas explained, projecting a flow chart onto the screen. "From there, it was transferred directly to Gordon Stewart's personal brokerage account. He used the identity of the woman sitting at that table as collateral to cover his own bad stock bets." "Objection!" Gordon's lawyer shouted. Mr. Stewart relied on the advice of his accountant, Gary Miller. If there was fraud, it was Mr. Miller's doing. We anticipated that defense, Rowan said calmly. We have Mr. Miller's sworn deposition, along with 300 emails from Mr. Stewart instructing him on exactly how to commit the fraud. She handed a thick binder to the bailiff. Exhibit C, Your Honor. Emails where Mr. Stewart refers to his daughter as the asset and discusses her liquidation value. The courtroom went deadly silent. I felt a chill run down my spine. The asset. He hadn't just itemized my life. He had commodified it. Judge Vance flipped through the emails. Her expression hardened. She looked at Gordon with something worse than anger. She looked at him with disgust. Mr. Stewart, the judge said, did you refer to your daughter as an asset to be liquidated? Gordon stood up. His hands were shaking. I was protecting the family, he shouted, his voice cracking. I knew, okay? I knew she wasn't ours. I suspected it for 5 years. She didn't look like us. She didn't act like us. Why should I pay for another man's child? Why should I ruin my retirement for a stranger? The admission hung in the air like smoke. You knew? Judge Vance asked quietly. We suspected. Patrice spoke up. It was the first time she had spoken. She was sitting very still, clutching her purse. Patrice, shut up, Gordon hissed. No, Patrice said. She looked at me. Her eyes were wide, panicked. She wasn't sorry. She was terrified of going to jail. We suspected years ago, when she needed blood work for that surgery in college. The blood types didn't make sense. But we didn't say anything. Why? I asked. My voice carried across the room. Why didn't you tell me? Because it benefited us, Patrice said, her voice trembling. If we claimed you weren't ours, we would look like monsters for giving you back. And Gordon said he could use it. He said if we waited until you were older, until you had earning potential, we could present the bill. We could get a return on the investment. I felt Conrad's hand grip my shoulder. He was shaking with rage. You kept a child as a hostage, Judge Vance said. For profit. It isn't illegal to raise a child, Gordon screamed. I want my money. I want the $300,000. Sit down. Mr. Stewart, the judge commanded. She turned to Rowan. Is there anything else? One more thing. Your Honor, Rowan said, to establish the context of how this situation began. We have a sworn statement from Maribel Knox, the charge nurse on duty the night of the birth. Rowan submitted the faded carbon copy of the nurse's log. This document proves that the switch was not an accident, Rowan said. It was the result of gross negligence and a cover-up by the hospital administration, a cover-up that the Stewarts eventually joined by their silence. Judge Vance took a long moment to read the log. Then she closed the file. She took off her glasses. I have heard enough, she said. She looked at Gordon. Mr. Stewart, your petition for reimbursement is denied with prejudice. There is no legal standing for a parent to bill a child for their upbringing, biological or otherwise. The very concept is abhorrent to this court. She picked up her gavel. Furthermore, she continued, her voice turning to steel, based on the testimony regarding the loans and the admitted identity fraud, I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for immediate criminal investigation. Mr. Stewart, you are to surrender your passport to the bailiff before you leave this building. Gordon slumped into his chair. He looked like a balloon that had been popped. As for the airship, the judge said, looking at me, the court recognizes the DNA results. The court recognizes the identity of the petitioner as the biological daughter of Conrad and Lila Hartwell. The name change request is granted. She paused. Is there anything the petitioner would like to add to the record? I stood up. My legs felt steady. I looked at Gordon, who was burying his face in his hands. I looked at Patrice, who was staring blankly at the wall. I reached into my pocket and pulled out Wren's letter. My sister, I said. Testing the word, it felt strong. My sister, Wren Hartwell, wrote this before she died. She never met me, but she knew exactly who Gordon Stewart was. I opened the letter. She wrote, "If they humiliate you publicly, it is not because they hate you, it is because they need you to sign something. They need to shame you into submission." I looked at Gordon. "And she wrote this," I said, reading the final line. Wren's last act wasn't replacing herself. It was protecting me from being used. I folded the letter. "I just wanted the record to show," I said, "that she was right." "So noted," Judge Vance said gently. Case closed. The gavel banged, a sharp, wooden sound that echoed like a door slamming shut on 30 years of confusion. I didn't stay to watch the bailiff approach Gordon. I didn't stay to watch Patrice cry. I turned around and walked toward the heavy oak doors. Conrad and Lila were waiting for me in the hallway. The sun was streaming through the high windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. "Are you okay?" Lila asked. She looked anxious, ready to catch me if I fell. I took a deep breath. The air didn't smell like floor wax anymore. It smelled like rain and asphalt and possibilities. "I'm not fixed," I said honestly. "I think it is going to take a long time to stop waiting for the bill to arrive every time someone is nice to me." "We have time," Conrad said. "We have plenty of time." "But," I said, looking at the exit, "I am free, and my name is Maisie Hartwell." "It is a beautiful name," Rowan said. Stepping up beside us, she handed me a file, my new birth certificate. "And it is legally yours, no receipts required." I walked out of the courthouse and into the bright, blinding light of the afternoon. I didn't know exactly where I was going next. I didn't know if I would learn to sail, or if I would ever ride a horse. But I knew I was going to a home where the doors locked to keep the world out, not to keep me in. I walked down the steps, leaving the Stewarts, the binder, and the debt behind me in the shadows. I stepped onto the sidewalk, and for the first time in my life, the ground beneath my feet felt solid. It felt like my own. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening on your way to work, at the gym, or maybe relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments below so we can connect. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Lucy Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people. Your support means the world to me.